Yep, the dead sleep again.
My journal.
Noroch's lines of worry smooth out as you speak. Thanks, give I. Thanks, give I! I'm just wondering if this is his name. Means I'm gonna research his name. I'm gonna enter my results right here. And so, it was time to put on my academic hat. So I have researched the name Norochj, or Norochj, or Norochj extensively, and honestly this was quite a trip. The cluster of consonant at the end is very unusual, and so my first thought was to look into anagrams, because I totally saw a John hiding in there. I even went so far as to fire up a Scrabble machine online to help with looking at all possible options. So it could have been John Orc, John Rock, or Joe H. Corn, Jock Horn, John Crow. I even looked at the list of people involved in creation of Planescape Torment to find any Johns, and I got John Dealey, John Palmero, and John Delancey. So no orcs or rocks, and I don't think any of them would have actually been those guys. I thought about it being a transformation or approximation of another word, possibly foreign then, and some quick misspelled searches later I came up with Yamada no Orochi is a mythological Japanese serpent of the sea, famously slain by Sano, a Shinto storm deity. Their duel is considered one of the examples of the primordial myth of the Order of the Sky confronting the chaos of the sea in a great battle, described as Chaoskampf. Some other example of that myth are Thor versus Jormungandr in Norse mythology, Zeus versus Typhoon, and Heracles versus Hydra in Greek mythology, Yahweh versus Leviathan and Baal Hadad versus Yam in Canaanite mythology, Quetzalcoatl versus Sipakti in Aztec mythology, Perun versus Veles in Slavic mythology, Ra versus Apep in Egyptian mythology, and many, many more. Among them, another multi-headed serpent from the Mesopotamian pantheon, Tiamat, slain by thunder god Marduk. Tiamat and the Yamato, both Tiamat and Orochi, were multi-headed sea serpents, and of course Tiamat is a well-established dragon god queen of greed in Dungeons & Dragons, as well as involved in the Planescape setting. So then I thought, am I onto something? Yamata no Orochi is Tiamat's Norochj? Could this really allude that Norochj is somehow a secret servant to Tiamat? Could it? Possibly not. Probably not. I could not really find any more connections, and existing evidence is at best substantial and rather far-fetched. So I believe that all of this is a pure but really awesome coincidence. But while in Google and their fancy search engine command, and found that many people in the interwebs have taken to that nickname across the years. A lot of them were used in D&D related content too, but weren't otherwise connected by any country or group, so I assumed all of them were derivatives of this game's character. One other interesting thing was that the name Emmerich, or variations of it, popped up multiple times on searching for Norochj, even without the context of Planescape Torment. Emmerich, of course, being another big Dustman name connected to Norochj. But whenever I entered a page that was supposed to be about Emmerich, there was no Norochj involved in any way, so it would seem like it was just Google making an association, so again, derivative of the game. Then I found a PDF of a book from 1892, a history of Greater Britain as well England as Scotland, that claims to have been somehow connected to Norochj, but after putting it into a software that recognizes images as font, it came up with a messed up chronology, interpreted as this monstrosity. So I concluded that the rare cluster of consonants, again CHJ, was somehow behind the inclusion of this result. So another dead end. Another book I found, The Making of London, that supposedly had something to do with Norochj, was mostly hidden behind paywall, and the word itself was not included in the quite sizable preview. The book talked extensively about Norse influence, and we'll get back to it in a moment. but because I couldn't investigate it further at that moment, I just pasted the word into Google Translate to see if maybe it will try to correct it to a different word, and to my great surprise, it did not. It detected Slovak and decided that it means Norwegian. Translating Norwegian back into Slovak, however, came back with Norochj, which is the regular name for Norwegian, which really made me want to go and actually buy that book to see if maybe it's an old word for Norwegian. But I decided against throwing my money away for nothing, and instead I decided to find me a Slovak person and ask them if they know this word. Maybe it's an old word, maybe it's a slang word. I don't immediately know any Slovaks, so I've done the next best thing, the Reddit hive mind, and before my question was downvoted to oblivion, for some reason, I got some cursory responses, like gibberish, not interested, gibberish, Norbert, actual linguistic input, fellow planewalker, Slovenian, huh? So then I started thinking about where this supposed gibberish come from. If I ignore the fact that Sir Bax on Reddit said that CHJ combination of letters sounds alien to Slovak, Norochj on its own just means ouch, supposedly, although then again, Google Translate might again be wrong on this one. Nor is generally used for all things Norse, so is Norochj just a northern ouch? Maybe it's a metaphor for being ouched in the head. And hence the Yoda-like inverted grammar. Maybe some brain damage involved. But then the next day, Google Translate decided to forget that it's translated Norochj into Norwegian, and decided that Norochj means crazy in Slovenian instead. And only on some browsers. On others, nothing at all. So Google Translate completely dismissed itself from this investigation as utterly unreliable. And all this lead, together with the potential exciting connection to the Norse stuff from that book, turned into a dead end. So it would have seemed that the answer eluded me. I almost gave up then, but because after hours of research I had no idea where this name came from. The time has come though to turn to the ultimate solution. I tweeted at Chris Avalon, the lead writer for Planescape Torment, asking him about it. While waiting on the response, I came back to the anagram idea, started combining that approach with thinking about other languages. And then it struck me that maybe I should just, read this backwards, because Norochj grammar is also backwards, the Yoda factor, so it gave me J. Choron. And after a mere Google search, Google gave me Jacques Choron, a philosopher. Born in Russia in 1904, Dr. Choron studied at the University of Berlin between 1922 and 1925, and then University of Leipzig in 1928. After a brief episode in France in the 1930s, he moved to the United States of America in 1941, where he continued in the field, receiving another doctorate in 1960. He passed away in 1972. What was the philosopher writing about? He was an author who studied death and self-destructive phenomena. Here you can see some examples of his book. So, it very well fits with the Dustman ideologies. So, an author obsessed with death? That was bullseye. This was exactly what it was. And even explained Yoda. The only picture of the author I found was black and white, so I can't confirm or deny if he was very pale or not. He definitely did not seem to have spiky hair, like in his in-game description. But that might be just a reference to the sprite the character was using, and the render that the journal could show you. All of this is of course based on Tony's Di Terlizzi's original Dustman art, which you can see right here. So now we know. Norochj is not in fact named after Japanese mythology, or Norse Slovakian linguistics, or some other weird stuff that I might have found on the way. He's just based on a quite obscure, but very thematic for Planescape Torment. Dr. Jacques Choron, very French name for a man born in Russia, but there we go. The pronunciation of the name still remains a mystery then, because if it's a French name, maybe it should sound something a bit like Norochj.
I don't know, probably not gonna use that.
I even tweeted back at Chris Avalon to tell him that I figured it out. Of course, both tweets were completely ignored. So, that's great.
I guess it's time for me to take off my academic hat.
Thanks, Give I. He reaches into his robes and draws forth a small bag, which he hands to you. Copper coin, 100. Thanks.